you are watching us from a pre-recorded episode. We welcome you to this week's town hall discussion, where we will be talking about PTSD. We are S.O.A.R Development Corporation. We are part of a subgroup of Word of Deliverance, but we'll tell you a little bit more about S.O.A.R development at the end of our conversation today. Without further delay, I want to take an opportunity to introduce to you a colleague of mine. We've known each other for a number of years. We've crossed paths here and there. And I'm going to take the liberty, if you will, to read his bio to you. And we have today Stan V. Ross. He is the executive director of Positive Influence Team. And he is helping what Positive Influence Team is. It's an organization helping to build relationships with youth and adults by shifting them towards a constructive and fulfilling lifestyle through positive transformation, personal development, education, awareness, and engagement. Stan provides group mentoring and coaching to those transitioning from incarceration back into the community. The Positive Influence Team focuses on their clients' strengths and helps them find their inner power to succeed and move forward. He also provides relationship trainings to offenders, probation officers to bridge the communication gap. He has served as the manager of the Cincinnati Initiative to Reduce Violence, that was SERVE. SERVE is a multi-agency and community collaborative effort that initiated in 2007, designated to reduce gun violence and associated homicides quickly and dramatically in the city of Cincinnati. After the 2001 riots in Cincinnati, Stan was instrumental in creating the Youth Street Worker Program as the coordinator, project manager of the Cincinnati Human Relations Commission. He was the recipient of the 2016 Saving Our City Award, recognizing his philanthropic efforts, and the 2014 Medical Mutual Pillar Award for Nonprofit Executive Director of the Year. Stan serves as a master trainer, coach, facilitator, and mentor with the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Ohio, Cincinnati Federal Mentor Reentry Program. Stan served as a consultant, facilitator, and motivational speaker with engagements at the Southern District of Ohio and Eastern District of Kentucky for the 6th and 7th Circuit Chief and Deputy Chief Training in Cincinnati and the National Network of Safe Communities in New York, the Ohio Crime Conference in Columbus and Cleveland, Ohio, seminars on preventing gang violence at the University of Cincinnati, as well as seminars at the Cincinnati Police Department's training. So as you can hear, Mr. Stan has a wealth of information, and he will contribute to our conversation talking about PTSD in the African American community from the perspective of his experience. So without further ado, I introduce to you Mr. Stan Ross. Yay!
Well, thank you, Dr. Kimberly Young. Look, I really appreciate that. And for those who are participating in terms of taking out the time to, I think, always add value to each other. I really appreciate everybody's time. And I know that, time is one of the most valuable things that we have. One of the things that I'm dealing with even right now is my mom is teaching me some other lessons in life. She's been blessed to reach the age of 85 years old, and she's starting to deal with some dementia. And, here it is, a woman that has put forth uh, her life in terms of giving and being a great example, as well as my father who was passed on. But I just speak about her because I've taken on the role of becoming a caregiver, which is not really that far of a stretch from, Dr. Youngblood, what you've read in terms of the calling for me to participate in various agencies and institutions in public service. And, I was, back with the street worker program when we had our civil unrest. Uh, I ended up getting me two big German Shepherd dogs. And when I got those dogs, I had to make sure that my yard was clean and they wouldn't track things back into the house. So I started carrying a big pooper scooper. And with carrying a pooper scooper, I realized that I had to make sure I was cleaning up my house before I left. And I had to come out in the streets and try to clean up things the best way that I could. So, it was a heck of a transition. And I say that to get back to my mom because that was, I guess now maybe more than 25 years ago. As far as the street worker program, the civil unrest, and all the things that have taken place in terms of where we are today. And of course, with the PDS and all of the trauma and all of the things that was taking place then that I saw from other jobs that I worked in terms of working with kids and working with youth and young adults as well as adults. This thing from my mom has put me in a position, here it is, a lady who retired from, at the time, it was General Hospital, and she retired from the city. And then she moved on to work with the Cincinnati public schools. So she did about 25 years with General Hospital, which was the city. And then she went on to do another about 25 years with Cincinnati public schools. And here it is, my mom, 85 years old, with this dementia that is really like, wow, and hers is more short term. And I don't know how familiar you guys are with, dementia. And I'm sure, I know I'm not the first, I'm not the last. So there's support that I need. But I bring that up to get to a point about all of the things that we will share this evening and the things that perhaps we will continue to share by building, I think, positive relationships where iron sharpens iron. And if you know that the spirit is in the room, then we are here for something greater than all of us. And so that's why I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to be amongst, some very beautiful people. With that being shared, the point that I'm making with my mom is simply this. As I go through these things, and sometimes I feel like I'm alone, and I feel like God has put on my heart, yeah, Stan, you got two brothers and two sisters, but I want you to make sure that on this caretaker's journey, that you take care of your mom and make sure you take care of yourself when it's all said and done. Because, time is one of these things that we never get back. And at the end of the day, we got to make sure we make amends. And in making amends, we learn how to forgive. And when we make amends and learning how to forgive, we make sure that we enjoy our lives. Enjoy our lives. And if you got it, spend that money. Okay. If you got it, spend the money. It ain't going nowhere. So with that being said, here's my climax. I look at my mom and I see her going through these changes. And you know what my mom says to me? And maybe you guys have heard this before. But she says, Stan, I know that there's challenges that's going on with me mentally. My mom can look at $5,000 and think it's only 500. So she's really resorted back to a child state in terms of the mental capacity as well as, just aging. And my mom will look at me and she'll come through real strong. And she'll say, you know what, Stan? If you keep living, trust me, everybody gets a turn. That's very humbling to me, to where I know it's bigger than me. It's not about just me. And with that being said, it just dovetails into, this purpose of what I'm doing. And I'm very fortunate to work with our Southern District Federal Probation Department here in Cincinnati. And because of some of the results that we've been getting in terms of reducing recidivism, we're about 67 to 70%. I meet a lot of young men and women who are either aging out of certain behaviors, have seen a lot of things. Most of these young men and women have spent at least about, I would say, average of 5 to 20 years in federal penitentiaries. However, I don't work with just the Southern District here. I've also worked with Lighthouse Youth Services over the last maybe 10 years. And those young people who are coming back to the communities in terms of reentering from Hillcrest and DYS and some of these other places, I have realized, and then to see the fathers that are not involved, as well as the mothers who are having challenges and where society is in terms of some of the emotional and social types of challenges that we all are facing. And with all of the social media and things like that, and all of the things that, these kids, as well as the news and all the stuff that we see, I still believe in the best that's in people, not the worst that's been done to people. And I say that because in my field of what I'm doing, I'm trying to make sure that I'm putting myself in a position to be a good talent scout and look for people that have gifts and talents that I don't have. And I'm not competing against anybody. I believe that, if we are doing what we're called to do, then my actions will speak a lot louder than what I'm saying even today. And because of that, as a result, people know that if you care, if they know that you care, they don't care what you know, but if they know that you care, I've been able to build bridges amongst the people who are being restored and those who are restoring them so that all parties can feel respected. And so I say all of that, Dr. Youngblood, and everybody else who's, can actually hear what I'm saying. And hopefully I haven't went all over the place. I'm just telling the story to make a point. And the point is, in terms of PTSD and things like that, I realize that there's a crack in the family foundation. And because of that crack in the family foundation, in terms of lack of the spirituality that we really all need, I mean, that is where it all starts in terms of to know thyself. And when you're not able to get in tune with the creator, when you're not able to get in tune with those who have scars and have made mistakes, and we're not being hypocrites about all this, then man, oh man, it can become a very beautiful thing if you are leaving the example of overcoming the obstacles, removing the barriers, setting goals, reaching goals, and fulfilling your life. And so that's just the top of things. And there's a deep root. And, as I mentioned before, it's about passing the baton. It's about really being able to find other people with gifts and talents and how we really can collaborate in a way to where I'm trying to get actually about 500 years out of my life. I mean, we know we still talk about Jesus. We still talk about Martin. We still talk about Maya Angelou. We still talk about my grandma Doshi that some of you guys don't even know, and she lived to be 100 years old. And the thing I'm saying is that if we're still talking about those great men and women, then what type of example did they leave? And what type of example are we going to leave? And so with that, I believe that, this marathon relay race is truly about passing the baton. So I'll it's a lot more, but I'll park it there, and Kim, we can keep this conversation moving.
Absolutely. I actually had a question. You mentioned something
Mhm.
for our average viewers who aren't familiar with some language and terminology.
Mhm.
You mentioned the word recidivism. Can
Mhm.
you explain that to us a little bit? What does that mean?
Well, recidivism has to do with, in simple terms,
Hmm.
if you are coming back to the community and you haven't changed your life or your lifestyle, then when you recidivate, that's a criminal term that's used for making another mistake.
Hmm.
Okay, and making another mistake that's criminogenic in and of itself.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
so that's really what that means is that when you recidivate, that means the chance, the opportunities that you've given you to have a second chance or a third chance or fifth chance, and you continue to be, then it gets into institutionalized, or the fact that you're familiar with a certain environment where you can't get it together. So you go back to what you're used to. So to
Mm,
reduce it in terms of recidivism, reducing it has a lot to do with those people who are transitioning to places and mindsets that once upon a time they didn't think that way. Now they're thinking in a more so-social type of way. That means that
okay.
men and women are taking their rightful place with their families and their communities. So you heard me say age out of different behaviors, because some of them are still dealing with trauma and still dealing with things that they don't have the solutions to being able to solve it, solve the problem that gets in the way of them changing, the cognitive behavior type of, thing, where the cognitions and coming together uh, is not conducive for them to realize that as they suffer, and they don't realize that in suffering for the right thing, there can be joy in your suffering if you're suffering for a good cause, because you know
Mm,
that you're not going through this for nothing. But a
mhm.
lot of us don't want to suffer, but we're suffering because of the anxieties that we bring up about suffering.
That's interesting you say that. You mentioned the word trauma.
Mhm.
Based on your experience working not only with individuals who have come through the judicial system,
Yes.
but the youth that have also come through the judicial system, can you speak about what you've noticed about the trauma that some of these people have, some offenders, I'll call her, uh, what they've gone through? Have you noticed
Yeah,
anything?
yeah. Well. What I've noticed is that a lot of some young people are very aggressive, and Jesus Christ, what is it? Where there be, where some of the behaviors are so, like, to go from 0 to 100 in a matter of seconds,
Mhm,
where usually you could count to 10 or 5 or sing a old McDonald song or something that
mhm,
cause you to calm down. So, what I've noticed is that the behaviors are just oh my God, what is the word? Dr. Kimmer, you would know
but
it. It's
kind of more systemic or more ingrained or more or deeper than
well,
what do you
well,
think?
yeah, well, it's how people react as opposed to respond. And
Mhm,
so they're reacting with, this emotions that, if you do something and you make a mistake, and the mistake you make is picking up the gun and you shoot it, and then you say later you didn't mean to, or oops, well, that moment can cause you consequences for the rest of your life
mhm,
if you don't know how to manage it. I mean, there are stages of development that we all go through. There's nobody exempt from it.
right,
But how do you make it plain to make sure that the person can see not only what you're saying, but they can see that this behavior is going to be detrimental, or it can be very positive, depending on the circle of influence or the environment that you're coming up in or that you're introduced to.
okay.
Some of the kids, I haven't met a kid that I couldn't check. And what I mean by check is to get him to or her to listen, and listen to learn, and learn to listen. And I say that, I don't have a magic wand, but I believe if you know how to check a person out of love, because,
Mm,
when you correct people, it's really out of love. They
mhm,
may not see it that way, but you got to be pretty firm with that. And when you're correcting people out of love, you got to make sure that before, along with the love, you got to give facts and you got to speak truths. And it has to be facts and truths, because this is a behavior. I see what you value, but what you value, you value your freedom, but the things that you're doing is causing you to lose your freedom. So
mm.
then, when the kids say this, Mr. Ross, I never thought about it like that. I got him.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
got it. For that period.
Hmm.
Because what happens is that, when they go back home and they go to their environments and they're not getting this type of reinforcements, it makes a teacher's job, a counselor's job, or anybody's job very hard to deal with that individual, because the manners, the home training, some of the things that we take for granted that are there are not there in a way that would build character. And not
Hmm.
only character, but would cause some of the attributes and some of the very positive traits to really come out of you in a way
Hmm.
to where someone would say, no, that young lady got some good manners. I
Hmm.
don't even know if they use them words today about manners and
No, they might say, oh, they lit or not, but
okay. So
I get
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. So I mean it's combustible is one of the words I was kind of going back in terms of this, this all of a sudden these behaviors, I mean, we used to have fights and things like that, but we didn't have the technology that can cause in my field of work, in terms of going out to meet young people in remote places where they were hanging out and things like that. And
Mhm.
you was making sure that they was going to be okay in terms of the things that they were doing as their little group. You could go there and hardly nobody be, like, okay, this is, ain't nobody around. We go up the block. You can go up the block and come back, and then it'd be 50, 60, 70 kids, because of the technology that causes people to communicate a lot quicker.
Mhm.
And so you look up and here they go. And then you could look up again and they all gone. So I believe technology, it's very doable and usable. But I think what has happened with high tech, what's missing is the high touch.
Mm.
And that
Mhm.
high touch is some of the things that, this subject that we're, discussing tonight. It has to be a high touch. And we have to be able to tag each other, because I don't want to run the horses into the ground. In other words, how do we pass on sharing the responsibility of being able to, uh, just like I said with the caregiving thing with my mom, how do you pass on uh, being able to make sure the quality of life that you live is one that you get to live, as opposed to just you being the one that feel like you're doing all the work and stuff like that. So I believe that when we are participating in our own rescue, then how do we make sure that everybody gets to relax and enjoy their lives? I
Yeah.
mean, everybody should get to take a vacation. You know, everybody should get to enjoy themselves and be happy for people who can take a vacation, even if it's just a home, I mean, whatever. In other words, everybody should get a chance to take out time for themselves and not think that you are the only one that's in this by yourself. And,
Yeah.
and, and sometimes we do this, and that's where burnout comes in at. People get burnt out, and then next thing you know, you're not good to the people who burning you out. You're not even good to yourself. So balance is the key and things like that.
Absolutely. So we speak about that to the clinicians, and for our listening audience, making that connection of taking some time to practice self-care. That
Mhm.
is a term that goes not only with those who work in the field, but also those who work everyday jobs, if you will,
Well,
any type of work you do. You have to unplug sometime. But what's interesting, kind of reconnecting to our topic of trauma,
mhm.
it when you live in an environment as it relates to focusing on their African American community, we have people, we're particularly experience a more finite, definitive, and compounded exposure to trauma without even realizing it. What I mean is that if you think about what PTSD is and
Mhm.
little backstory of that is, PTSD came out of, the term was coined back in the 2000s, early 2000s, and it the term racial battle fatigue is a
Mm,
term that was established way back in early 2000s. It was also referred to as post-traumatic slave syndrome. So it's
wow.
another terminology that was used, that has been, and sometimes you would hear more with African American, um, who are aware of what it's like to live in the inner city,
Yes.
or what it's like to live, in an environment where you're constantly exposed to gun violence. That's a
Mm.
form of trauma. And our point of our conversation today is to talk about, how does PTSD show up in the African American community? And one of those ways is, we'll see a lot of our, African American men going in and out of the system, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
which leads to that comment that you made about recidivism, that you're
Mm-hmm.
really working to drop that rate, that you want to interrupt the process of men or women or children going back and forth to prisons.
Yes.
But oftentimes, my experience working, in a correctional center, allowed me to see that these men and women had experienced very, um, hefty trauma, anything from sexual trauma, but
Mm-hmm.
to emotional abuse, to
Mm-hmm.
physical abuse, and
Mm-hmm.
poverty in itself
Mm-hmm.
can be traumatic. Um, I want to just draw on a few things that I kind of pulled up here. And I'm just going to read this. This is something, I looked up earlier today, that not only do the day-to-day interactions wear on Black people and other people of color, particularly those that are diasporic, or meaning they're outside of the standard communities,
Mm-hmm.
even those individuals, and how generations after generation is exposed to trauma impacts everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, our day-to-day interactions, from just daily driving down the street, for someone who is non-melanated, if you will, they don't have the same fear response as an African American man who sees a police officer who may pull up behind them. As
Mm-hmm.
an African American man, you may get nervous because you don't know what's going to happen. So
Mm-hmm.
we have to talk about how trauma in itself is impacting us, and it impacts our fear response. I I I, I bring to everyone's attention that we recently had just, some young men who were arrested for, um, selling water. And they weren't arrested for selling water. They were actually arrested for how they reacted to the police officers. But their reaction was a fear response. But if no one's trained to recognize that, then someone will react to their reaction. So we have, speaking to your point, Stan, how people are reacting a
Mm-hmm.
lot more quicker, a lot
Correct.
quicker, I should say, than in previous times. And before, we would have, let's count to 10, let's take sing happy
Mm-hmm.
birthday, and we can
Mm-hmm.
de-escalate ourselves. But
Right.
there isn't a de-escalation process nowadays, and I believe it may be, just hypothetically speaking, some connection to our inundated social media, information. So we become desensitized, and we lack the ability to bring and calm ourselves down, which then, I'm gonna go back a little bit more. If we think about from the 1960s through Jim Crow era, the PTS look like, this looks like carrying the expectations of keeping the house in order and caring for the children.
Mm-hmm.
So systemically and historically, African Americans have been living in some kind of trauma setting for years, for decades. So again, going back to the Jim Crow era, slavery times, that's traumatic in itself, that you've got to care for the children. You've got to make sure you make, you have to do what they had to do to survive. So am I going to be whipped? Is this going to be the time that master's going to come in from the into the slave quarters? And am I going to be separated from my children? So trauma in the community has existed for years, for decades. So here we are in the 2000s, what are we, 2022, and we're still dealing with trauma. Why am I even bringing that up right now? And I'm sorry, Stan, I'm gonna pass the baton back to you.
No, you're good.
The fact that when we can look at the historical legacy of trauma within our community and see how it's showing up now, if we've never learned how to deal with trauma in itself way back here, the trauma, whatever that trauma is, showing up in this here and now, we really don't have the skills to deal with it now. So we have either a fear reaction, which means we are either going to fight or we're going to run. We don't freeze. It's very rare that we freeze in the midst of a trauma, right? Although that's a whole nother conversation to have. We do have trauma bonds, meaning my trauma will match your trauma. I recognize your trauma, you recognize mine, and now we've created a bond, which then creates another ripple effect, because now you're going to draw in other people who deal with trauma as well. Thank you. It looks like we have a question.
Your sister, Velda.
Okay. Hello, everyone.
Hey.
So when I was in nursing school at UC, I remember telling my mom that I'm just on edge every day when I go, because I just feel like they always want to judge me for every little thing. And the instructors, the other students talk down, And I think once I got that degree, I now have almost no tolerance for people of other color. And they don't even have to do anything necessarily negative. If I perceive something, I find that sometimes I can be very inappropriate. And I really think it stemmed from trauma that happened to me when, as Lincoln Heights, consolidated with Princeton, and I was separated from my friends, and then nursing school. So yesterday, I went to get some gas. No, Tuesday, I went to get gas at Costco, and afterwards, I just parked in the parking lot to eat a salad. And a cop pulled kind of next to me. So I stayed there and I ate the salad. And then I went over there to the police car, and I let my window down, and then I beckoned for him to let his window down. And I said, now, are you standing here in your car because my car is parked over here? Are you watching me? He says, oh, no, ma'am, no. This is just where I come to chill. And I said, oh, okay. He said, I'm so sorry. And I said, no problem. I was just checking, and as I pulled off, I said, Valda, get yourself together. How you gonna go over there and check the police? But I did. And I really think that I just have almost zero tolerance. I'm so glad that I'm not a dark complected Black male, because I probably would have been hurt by now, because I don't tolerate much. And I really do think that I do have, even today, I deal with some post-traumatic stress from being African American.
Absolutely.
Mm,
Yep.
mm,
Yeah. Good. And that's actually a perfect example. Our go-to thought is, why are they watching me?
Yep.
That's our go-to thought.
Mm-hmm.
Versus I'm just sitting here, oh, I feel safe that there's a police officer. I feel safer now. And that is a direct connection to our Black experience, which is again how PTSD shows up in our communities.
mm,
But if we aren't aware of it and then we're not educated or educating our own selves on what it looks like, how it shows up.
mhm,
So when I am sitting in my car and I see a police officer pull up, I may have that, are they watching me? But
mm,
I'll know, okay, wait a minute, that's my trauma response. That's my
Mm-hmm.
trauma brain just kicked in.
Mm-hmm.
Let me
mm,
ask myself really some questions until we get more educated on what it looks like. Then we can educate others. Because when we're not educated, then we end up passing misinformation to one
mm,
another
mhm,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
inadvertently. Because we had to teach our African American male children 10 and 2.
mm,
Keep your hands on the steering wheel.
Yep.
We had to teach them that.
mhm,
But the non-melanated communities did not have to do that. But
mm,
again, it's important to educate, that even
Mm-hmm.
being taught 10 and 2, don't let your hands slip if a police officer stops you, keep your hands visible. Just teaching that lesson in itself heightens the awareness of the
Mm-hmm.
stress,
mm,
which then, if there's ever an event, now I have experienced the trauma.
mm,
So I was already stressed. I experienced an event, be it police pulled me over and they were rude. They might have let me go, but boy, they scared the heck out of me. Now
mm,
I've had my traumatic experience, which forever changes how I think.
Mm-hmm.
mm,
Mm-hmm.
mm.
So again, I'm so sorry. Did you
No,
have?
no, no. I mean, I think that our experiences are definitely our experiences in terms of, what we take from it and some of the very things that we go through, in terms of what we perceive. I can tell you, I think part of my connection with a lot of young men and young women or young adults and just people, period, is that, you know, I suffered trauma back when I was at 308 Erkenberger, right above Hearn.
Yeah.
Uh, Sister Valda, you know where that is, right? Right above Hearn, right? Before the church moved out when where
Yep.
it was
That's
then
right.
and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this was back maybe in 1965, 66. And I say that, went to Rockdale Elementary, but what I'm simply trying to say, guys, is that what happened in terms of a traumatic experience, besides, and that was back in the days when men put their hands on women and the police didn't do nothing but said stop. And I didn't like that in terms of what my father was doing, to my mom and fighting and this and that. And then a little bit after, just as a kid, you can see a lot. But
Mhm.
then my father ended up making a decision, and the decision that he made ended up landing him in a federal penitentiary. And so from maybe the second grade, if I was 8 or 9, and visiting a federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. And, at that time, if I was 8, he didn't get out until I was 16. But during that time of visiting him and all the things that went on, even from, the fact that we used to get lunch money. Now it's no lunch money, it's free lunch. We used to get better clothes. It was a lot of things that happened. And so my behavior in regards to what I was doing based on visiting him there and things that was taking place where my mom and then seeing other men looking at my mom when I feel my father should have been there to protect my mom, to protect us. I became the little man. So Stan Ross, I was Stan the man, and I took it literally. And sure enough, y'all, I'll be honest with you, my parents, my father told me, boy, if somebody do something to you, you pick up something and hit them with. Well, of course, being so I would fight. I would pick up a stick, pick up a brick, just based on protecting myself. Because my father said, if somebody do something to you, well, I think you'll get that's assault now, unless you're protecting yourself. And of course, if guns were as prevalent as they are today, I don't know what I would do in terms of dealing with that situation back then. But I bring that up because what happens is I made a vow not to, in experiencing that, not to ever go to prison. And I had to learn the things that was leading people to jails and prisons. And even when people came out of jails and prisons who thought that they had a stripe or an honor because they went there, I would then start protecting people in the community. So you think you better than somebody just because you don't went to jail? You think you better than somebody? So I'm saying all that because, Dr. Young, you mentioned about how sometimes the programming of certain traumatic experiences can start teaching you to behave and believe certain things to where who's there to expose you to a better way? Who's there to let you know, no, man, you don't have to do this. This is how you do this. Well, Stan, that's all I know. Well, okay. Well, but your best thinking has created some problems that this thinking can't solve. So let me expose you to some of my scars. And not only expose you to my scars, but how I was able to build resiliency to deal with it and cope with it and listen on a level that where I wasn't saying, like you said, I wasn't comparing how bad my trauma was to your trauma. What I'm saying is, look, man, this is how I work through it. And you know what? I'm not by myself. So, to be sober-minded in terms of thinking and to be able to get the spirituality, that's definitely the foundation. And then the therapy. I think this very group is very therapeutic for me this evening in terms of being able to listen and to talk and to share. And it should be 1,000 people on this, listening and talking and sharing, because it's very real. Sister Valda, when she talked about the police and I size up, we size each other up, y'all. I size people up, I'm telling you. And I try to do it where I'm not offending you, but I see you. And I have to tone myself down because, people that know me can tell it's a certain look, a certain way where my energy begins to be. Now I'm looking to actually de-escalate from the beginning, but there are some situations where I can recognize like this person got mental health issues. I'm talking about 5-6 seconds. And I'd rather see it that way than to miss it. Because y'all know you can go into Kroger, as Sister Val just said, go into Costco. Well, it's people that go to these grocery stores and people go to school and somebody want to shoot us because what? And all we was doing was shopping. That's not to be paranoid, it's just to be aware. And how can we, be able to make people see that you do care, that you can give a certain look that is not a look of I'm paranoid, but a look of I see you. Is there anything I can do to help you? Because I believe in making you think twice. If you think twice, I got to change. But if you don't think at all, and I'm talking about, I love to enjoy this 4th of July weekend and next year and whatever time I got left. But people that don't care and that's been traumatized and this old saying, if he don't care about his mom and his daddy, I don't stand a chance with him. So I bring that up because we do face a lot of young men and women who will begin to reflect about their childhood experiences. And it gives us a real foundation to start building, dare should I say, a relationship. Because when you build a relationship and it becomes real and authentic, and you empower people to take their rightful place, that's very fulfilling for me, because you're not going to burn me, even though I've been burnt before. But I learned that being burnt by the fire that's coming from the real spirit is purification for me. So it ain't a whole lot you can do to me in terms of what I know, in terms of what my purpose is and things like that. So I can laugh at myself and I just don't have a problem with that because I'm pretty solid in regards of just really being able to simply know when to speak and know when to shut up. Look like somebody got their hand up, so I got need.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. It's Wanda Wallace. How's
evening.
everyone?
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
I wanted to just make a comment. It's kind of funny, but it's not, with Dr. Valdo. Listening to how she felt going to school and the intimidation and frustration of how people make you feel. And you all talked about when you get the knowledge that you can do better, or when you get the knowledge, you know how to react a different way. So of course, we as adults now, Dr. Valda as an adult now, she has somewhat what we would say arrived. I've got my degree. I've gone through school. I've gotten over the frustration. So seeing this policeman sitting there like he's checking me out for whatever reason, because of my color, because I'm a female, the intimidation is not there anymore. But in me is to let you know that I am where I am. I have arrived, and I know now I have a right to be able to speak what I feel.
Mhm.
And a lot of times people try to hold you down because of a fear factor. And she's letting this officer know there's no fear factor in me. I do want you to know I see you, I recognize you, but also I'm just as equal or more than you. So just to let you know, I see you, as you said, Mr. Ross, I see you. And I want you to know I see you. I know what you're about, and I'm going to give you a chance to explain, like the officer said. Oh, no, ma'am, this is where I come and chill. Whereas maybe 15, 20 years ago, she may not have reacted in that way. But we have come to a point in our life where we now do have knowledge and realize there are just some things we don't have to accept anymore.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a real good point. Well, one of a real recent incident that happened. I do groups out in my office, which is out there in Blue Ash off of Reed Hartman Highway. One of the guys, so all the guys that come are, under federal probation and things like that. So I do it in the evening time from about 5:30 to 7:30, 3 Wednesdays out of the month. One guy was coming out there. Just long story short, a gentleman was coming to the group. He got pulled over by a Blue Ash police officer. He got pulled over by a Blue Ash police officer, kind of up in the complex where the office is. Another young man who had passed by him and saw him, because when police officers pull you over and the tags in, it's a couple cops, so it could look like it's something about to. Plus, they ran his plate. They found out that he had a record and this and that. And a guy came into the group and said, "Stan, oh boy, out there with the police." And we hadn't had no experience with the police, because the guys, everybody know what's going on and things like that. And, out in the Blue Ash area and so forth and so on. Anyway, I immediately went outside to see what was going on in a way that I wasn't going to obstruct their business, but I could see what was going on. So when the way that I approach them, it's kind of like Sister Valda mentioned about being able to, ask a question. Well, what happened was when I got there, the gentleman had done so well with knowing what to do when being pulled over. He was talking about the positivity of the group, of what goes on, why he was out there, what he was doing in regards, and he didn't have his plates displayed properly, which is why they pulled him over. It's a reason. So they really put him over. They didn't give him a ticket. They told him, because once he started exchanging what he was doing on a positive tip, or what he was doing in terms of just carrying himself. And then I came and kind of reinforced what we were doing. But let me tell y'all what happened after that. I said, look, guys, I said, you guys may not know that this is what we do in terms of building relationships, yada, yada. I said, I'd like to invite you officers to the group so that then you can come and be able to see what we do and you can explain to them what you guys do. Do you
Yeah.
know, within about 3-4 weeks, I was able to invite those police officers to the group. They came to the group. And people need to know. I mean, I don't want, I'm very transparent. I want you to see that we're making a very, very positive steps in all this mutt and grut of stuff that's going on. And yes, these guys are ex-offenders. You wouldn't know that if you was in the room. You wouldn't know it at all. Anyway, the officers came, and to how they carried themselves, they left saying, we did not expect this. So when we touch lives and we educate people, because I believe education is your passport to the future. It's just, how do we educate? And I think that you can be educated, from the books that we read, but also from the very stories that are being told and the very experiences that we go through and the very songs that are being sung. So education is not limited just to the classroom. It goes beyond that. And that's where it was just a great experience. And what it did is expose those guys to get past the fear of dealing with the police, because they saw an example like, dang, Stan was able to go out there and the very thing that we was talking about, he brought him in here, and we all became equal in a way to where it wasn't the police against us, it wasn't us against the police. This is what we're doing, and you never know who you're going to see that can help you at a time where now he's, instead of being Officer Johnson, oh, that's Tim. Even though he's an officer, and
That's right.
yeah. So anyway.
That's good. That's good. Well, I'm looking at our time, and we endeavor to keep ourselves committed to an hour. And but this discussion was absolutely wonderful, and didn't even get to some of the other things to consider, what to look for as it relates to PTSD in the African American community. But I believe that the conversation was rich, and I pray that those who are with us and those who are watching us sometime in a future date, that you were able to get something from our session, our conversation today, and that you will join us again. We are here every fourth Thursday of the month from 7:30 to 8:30. And just to tell you who we are S.O.A.R Development, excuse me, S.O.A.R Development Corporation. And we were established in October of 2000 as a faith-based nonprofit community development corporation. We seek to work within the greater Cincinnati community by creating health and human services that will strengthen individuals and families to achieve their physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. The goal of S.O.A.R is to leverage both human and economic resources that will help our community be strengthened to overcome, to achieve, and to restore. And we are S.O.A.R. If you need or would like to get a hold of anyone in the S.O.A.R department, now I'm going to have to ask my wonderful background assistant, Kim. Can you please provide the number for me again for our listeners who are watching, who may want to get a hold of S.O.A.R in some kind of way, if you're there, or Pastor V, if you're able to give that to me. Oh, Lord. Can y'all hear me? I kind of put everybody on spot.
I'm gonna check the flyer.
Okay, thank you. Again, we are here every fourth Thursday of the month, and we begin at 7:30 and generally go until about 8:30. And our focus of conversation is always about what is going on in the African American community as it relates to substance abuse and mental health and the stigma. I am seeing a shift. I'm excited and I'm encouraged that within our community, I'm seeing a shift, that we're more open to talk about mental health issues. We're more open to be transparent in our challenges. Yes.
Okay, the phone number 513-909-0925.
Thank you so very much. Again, we are S.O.A.R Development, and we appreciate each and every one of you for being here tonight. Mr. Stan, thank you so very much for
Yes,
sharing
thank
your
you.
wisdom, your insight, and your experience. It was a valuable moment to share, and I bid everyone who's joined us tonight a wonderful, cool evening. Stay safe, stay blessed, stay anointed, and all will be well. Have a good night,
Thank you.
everyone.